5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to the GHT Overland podcast. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland podcast.
This is where you get the greatest interviews and insights from overland travelers around the globe, learning from their stories and experiences as we interview overlanders from around the world. You will learn the basics to the advanced in overlanding, so buckle up and get ready for more adventure. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. This is part 2 with Dave and Angela of Polaris Overland.
This week, Dave and Angela finished telling us about the entire experience they went through with Angela needing to have surgery. But we don't stop there. So buckle up and get your notepads out as they walk us through border crossings, tips for couples traveling who are not allowed to cross borders together. I didn't hear that before, so that was a new one. Really great tips on safety and security with lessons to be learned from when they were being robbed and they lost their passports. A lot of great information. And just a heads up, this is our longest episode to date, packed with great stories and helpful intel. We hope you love it as much as we do. And I think we're ready to go. Lisa?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, let's jump back into the interview with Dave and Angela of Polaris Overland.
2 hours before the operation, I would say, at the end of Angela's bed of all places with the hospital administration while they were trying to make sure that they were going to get paid. My insurance had already sent them a letter of guarantee that they would pay the bill, but they didn't really understand what that was or what that meant. And at one point they wanted me to go to an ATM at midnight and take out $4,000 out of an ATM to bring it back as a down payment for the surgery.
Is that even possible?
No, it's not. I had to explain that to them, that there's limits on what you can take out in a day, and it doesn't really work that way. No. They had no means of accepting a credit card payment. I had no problems with the fact they wanted to make sure they were going to be paid. That was fine. The insurance had given them a letter of guarantee. I'd said that I would pay. In the end, I had to write a guarantee that if the insurance didn't pay, I would pay. So Angela went through and had a surgery. They came back to me the next morning because originally the plan was they were going to come back and try and get the money out of me the next morning. But by then they'd obviously either had a change of heart or maybe thought about the way it all gone, and they were very apologetic and were happy with the insurance. However, throughout the whole time that Angela was in the hospital, they still kept coming back to ask if they hadn't had a response from the Russian agent by a certain time. They were saying, are we going to get paid? And so I would have to phone to make sure it was all sorted out. So
that had to have been really stressful.
It wasn't the best thing to have going on when obviously all I was worried about was Angela, and for Angela to see me at the end of the bed arguing with two administrators about whether or not they're going to be paid or how they're going to be paid.
Whether the operation was going to go ahead, isn't it?
Yes, although they were still prepping Angela for the operation, we didn't know if they were going to do it, if they weren't going to do it, what was going to happen. So, but thankfully, it all worked out, and
it was the Russian agents that was the problem, not so much the hospital.
Yeah, the Russians agents made it a little bit difficult because they didn't know how to deal with the Uzbeks either. So the Uzbek system is difficult. Then you have the agent in Russia, and then obviously all this information is then going 3 ways all the way back to the UK as well, to the insurers there. But at no point did the insurance turn around and complain about any payments or anything else.
Very good.
They were very, very good. Very good.
And the hospital was excellent. They were really nice people. The doctors were very attentive. And everybody was so really good. The only problem was obviously the language, and that's not their problem. That was my problem because I obviously can't speak their language. But it was a bit scary being there, people talking about you, talking about your condition, and you didn't really understand. Maybe someone once a day would come back and explain things to you. So it was a bit scary, but the hospital itself was very, very good.
The hospital was only less than a year old.
Yeah.
And it was very modern facilities, very clean. They were really, really good. The only complaint I have is the dealing with the administration. And that was the hardest part of it. As far as Angela was concerned, obviously I was concerned about her getting the right surgery and getting what she needed. Having been in the state hospital, our concern was that she was going to have the surgery done in the state hospital, which we were really concerned about. So the doctor at the original clinic, who then found this private hospital for us, like I say, he went above and beyond to help us out and get things sorted. And the minute that we said that we were going to a private hospital, our insurance said, that's great. We know what you went through in the state hospital. Just do it. We'll send them all the details. So very, very good.
The insurance that you use, Nomad Insurance, is that like a separate traveler's insurance compared to any insurance you may have back home?
Yes. It's insurance to cover us for all the traveling throughout the trip. You buy the insurance based on the countries you're going to be going to. So if you're just going to Africa, you can cover Africa. You can cover the whole of the world. But when you cover the whole of the world, there are a couple of countries that are excluded. And you can, it's like any insurance. You can say, okay, they will spend up to a certain amount for medical, a certain amount for repatriation, and everything else after that. And the other item with the Uzbekistan, because we'd driven in the Land Rover, by customs rules, I'm not allowed to leave the Land Rover in Uzbekistan. So we tried to get the British Embassy involved to try and help to get us to it, so I could basically fly back with Angela back to the UK. However, that wasn't possible. So the insurance then arranged for a medical nurse, paramedic, escort, basically an escort who was a paramedic, who then came to the hotel we were staying at by then in Uzbekistan, who flew back with Angela all the way back to the UK and then in the car up to Aberdeen to drop her off at home. And while they were doing that, I then had the job of driving. It was about 600 miles, so it took me 2.5 days to Almaty in Kazakhstan, where I could actually leave the Land Rover. And then I flew back to join her for just over a week to make sure everything was okay here back at home, that the kids were looking after her and that she was okay and had everything she needed. Before I then flew back to Almaty and drove the rest of the way back from there, which was about 7,000 miles, I think.
Yeah.
Oh my
Wow,
goodness.
that's amazing. Well, I really appreciate you taking the extra time to kind of walk us through that process. And I'm glad that everything worked out.
Yeah, no, everything's good now. It was a bit scary for me being at home, knowing that Dave was driving all the way back on his own, knowing he had to go over borders and things. And not that there was ever major problems there, but it's always a thought that you're on your own. If there was a problem, there's no one else there to sort of help you along. So, yeah, I had to sit there and watch him coming back while I was sitting at home bored. And also being a bit, concerned that in case there was any problems, him travelling on his own, camping out on his own, these sort of things. Not that I can do much, but it's just nice to have someone else with you there, if there is any problems, that you can bounce ideas back and forward to each other.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Very true.
I was going to get deported in Russia. It would have been nice to have Angela there to be deported with me.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's very smart for our listeners to make sure that they do that proper research, learn from your lessons to make sure that they've got that proper insurance outside of any insurance that they may have back home. So,
absolutely.
Tell us about what your process was for planning your trip, along with either any daily or weekly planning that you did.
For the trip we did last year, which we called our big trip, we did a lot of planning in advance of the places that we wanted to visit. Most of the trip last year was the first major country we came to was Turkey. We didn't really know what to expect there. So we'd kind of planned the places we wanted to go and visit and what we wanted to go and see. Visas are easy for Turkey. You just do those online, so that made life a lot easier. The only other issues with the Europe part of the trip was probably more costs than anything else. Europe is an expensive place to travel around, and to travel around full time. We had one issue when we were in Europe, where in Spain, where we had our passport stolen, and we were supposed to be in less than 2 weeks going to Morocco with some other overlanders. Morocco was great. We managed to do that on emergency passport, so we had something that we could do there. For this trip that we did this year, this trip actually came about because when we're in Morocco with the other overlanders, somebody came out with a flippant comment that we should all meet up in Mongolia next year for the Nadam festival. Yeah. And we all took it as a bit of a joke. And then slowly, as time progressed, we all started thinking, well, hang on, that might be a good idea. So let's see what we can do. For the Mongolia trip, it's much more difficult because you have a lot more visas that you have to get. You've got a lot more expense involved with those visas. And you have to time your visas so that they start on the correct day, finish on the days that you need as you travel along. So we did spend a lot of time planning the visa side of it and working out a route so that we could do the route and obviously make sure that the visas went on the days that we needed them. Some visas you can only get in your home country, so we had to get them before we left. And some visas you can get on the road as you're going along, whether it involves going to an embassy or involves doing it online. So most of our planning as far as that went was there. The only other thing we were doing for Mongolia was because we were changing our setup, we went and saw a few people to change what we wanted to change and we had to make sure that worked before we left.
We did the North Coast 500.
Yeah, we did a North Coast 500, which is a trip in Scotland that goes around the very north of Scotland through some of the best scenery as a run out as a test just before we left.
How did you learn about the visas and which ones you needed to get at home, which ones you needed to get while you were on the road, and the timing when they're good, when they expire?
A lot of that we went on to online is one place. Also on Facebook, there's an Overlanders page, which was Overlanding Asia. So we spoke to people who'd either already done the trip or were in the process of planning the trip themselves. And we spoke with the guys that we were possibly going to be meeting that we'd been in Morocco with on how their planning was going as well. So between us all, we managed to get most of the information that we needed. The dates we had to sort out ourselves because it depended on what trip each of us was specifically doing. A lot of the times you get a visa. The visa will be valid you can go into the country for 30 days, but you have to use it within the 90 days or whatever that the dates are on the visa. Okay. So you have a slight margin to play with. In other instances, we gave up on going to Turkmenistan because we had to get the visa in Baku in Azerbaijan. You then have a ferry that goes across the Caspian Sea into Turkmenistan. And we could only get a transit visa for Turkmenistan, which lasts for 5 days. Often, very often, the ferry will leave 3 or 4 days late from Baku, and then it'll sit and not arrive in Turkmenistan for 3 or 4 days either. So you have instances where your visa has actually run out before you've actually arrived in the country. So for us, we made the decision at that point, rather than going that route, we would get multiple entry visas for Russia. And we would travel around the top of the Caspian Sea. So we went up through Georgia, into Russia, around the top to Kazakhstan, and then ran the full length of Uzbekistan to give us some control over where we were and when we were there. Russian visas, that was fairly simple, but it's an expensive visa. we found with that, a single entry is fairly easy, and a transit visa is fairly easy. But in order for us to drive all the way to Mongolia, we were going to have to go in and out of Russia at least 3 times. So the only way we could do that was to do a multiple entry visa, which lasts for a year, allows you 90 days in total in Russia, but you can go in and out as often as you want. But the costs for that were about £1,000 for the 2 of us, I think.
Okay.
So not cheap, and you have to fill out a very invasive questionnaire about your whole life.
Fun.
But yeah, there's people out there and there's resources out there. Facebook is a good one. Overland Sphere, and they have, and the Overlanding Association have a good website for going on to look at visas for each country. You can also look at temporary import for the vehicle rules, insurance rules, and everything else. So the information is on there. It's just knowing where to look for it, to be honest.
Okay, very good. So border crossings, what tips do you have in preparing for them, and how long do you consider each one is going to take on an average for you?
Preparation, I guess, is we just
make sure you have all your documents.
Yeah, we always carry one file which basically has everything in it that we need.
And copies.
So we can hand over copies as needed. We'll have photocopies of our visas if we needed them when we go there. We generally make sure that we've got coffee in a thermos.
Yeah.
And we've got a good book, because some of the border crossings can take quite a while.
Yeah, Mongolia.
Mongolia, I think, was our worst one, which was about 12, 14 hours to go across.
Okay. How many copies do you usually take with you?
Probably about 10.
Okay, of each thing?
10 copies of most things.
No, more
passports, driver's license, visas as well. We have a few copies of those. Some places it's easier just to hand over the copies and then just walk away, because everything gets done quicker.
Car documents.
Car documents, we had copies, insurance.
Yeah.
A lot of the insurance, you need to know in advance if you need to get the insurance at the border and if it's available at the border for you to get.
Any specific crossings that stand out to you?
We had one in Kazakhstan where we were actually going into Kazakhstan, and Angela isn't allowed to drive in the car with me when we go through, so she had to walk through, whereas I had to drive through, and they decided this day that they wanted to make life a little bit more difficult for me. So I think Angela had gone through and then ended up waiting 4.5 hours for me to follow through.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
They searched the Land Rover 4 times. They put me through an X-ray machine. They kept asking me if I was their friend and drawing dollar signs in the ground. And things like that. So I just pleaded ignorance, that I didn't understand the language. And when they drew the dollar signs in the ground, I used to say, no, I'm British. We have pounds, and drew a pound sign in the ground. And just in the end, I think they got bored and
they got fed up.
They got fed up waiting. They were expecting to get something.
What was the deal that Angela couldn't be in the vehicle?
You're not, in some places that you go to, the passengers aren't allowed to go through in the vehicle. They have to walk through with the pedestrians or the people on buses and things like that. So she would have to go through ridiculous. On her own, and I would go through myself.
Yeah. Huh. Which there wasn't a problem for walking through, right?
No, it was all fairly straightforward and everything else. Okay. It's just in this one instance, it meant that Angela was actually in a different country to where I was, wondering what was going on. So after that one, we made a rule that she wasn't allowed to go all the way through until I was actually following through, because if there had been a problem, she's in the wrong country to me, life gets a little bit difficult. So that was something we learned while we were going along.
Smart.
So, but other ones, Mongolia was a long one.
It was long.
Long going in and long coming back.
It was quite funny in Mongolia, though, sitting there in the queue. They had people playing music and different things. The families would get out the car. And then when the car started moving, it was like everybody running to their cars, jumping in them and driving. Because if you didn't go with the flow, somebody from behind you came flying in and went into the space in front of you. It was quite funny.
Okay. It was like the cannonball run.
Interesting. So did you guys ever hire an agent to help with border crossings, or what is your viewpoint on that?
No, we didn't. I've heard in Africa it's worth it, and I know some people who have. Where we were, we've never needed that.
No, it's quite easy to do ourselves.
Yeah. With a little bit of looking up the information, and if you can, again, like I said, Overlanding Asia was one that we went on. We can speak to people who've maybe only crossed the border a day or 2 days before you, so you can get very up-to-date information on that.
Oh,
And also
there you
have
go.
translate
Yeah.
on your phone.
Yeah, and have Google Translate. That always helps.
Any specific safety planning you did or tips you can provide our listeners on safety and security?
Common sense, basically. We didn't go to anywhere where there was anything political. We stayed away from any rallies or anything like that. Safety, we sort of looked where we were camping, checked out.
We tend to, if we're wild camping, we would try, depending on the country we're in, we'd try and get out of sight. Not always possible. Money-wise is usually locked away and locked in different places, the same with our main documents like passports and things like that. Have a look online again. Have a look at your country foreign office, like the British Foreign Office. They have appraisals of each country that you're going to and what the current climate's like, so you can have a look on there to see what to expect. The only time, I guess, was a little bit concerning was just before we did Tajikistan and the Pamir Highway, was when some cyclists had got run off the road and I think 4 had been killed. That happened about a month, maybe a bit less before we went. And a lot of people, not just ourselves, were all wondering if it was worth doing the route or not. So some people were getting together so they could do the route together. But other than that, most of it has not been an issue. One thing I will say is definitely look at your, like I said, with our Foreign Office page. We didn't do that last year on the trip. We kind of relaxed after doing all the Eastern European countries, like Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia, and we've been to Turkey. And then we actually got robbed on the motorway in Spain. And we were not far from Barcelona. We know Barcelona is bad for robberies and people getting their wallets stolen, their bags stolen. We had no intention of going into Barcelona just purely because of that issue. However, we got stopped on the toll road. The day before, we'd had a problem with the trailer in France. This next day, they told us we had a problem with the trailer, so I stopped, whereas normally I wouldn't have just stopped. And while we were stopped, they stole Angela's handbag, which took her passports with her. We let our guard down, and we probably got a little bit complacent after having been through what we classed as the bad countries.
And we never had a problem there.
And we never had any problems there, and where we got caught was actually in Spain. So
Interesting.
don't leave handbags lying around. We, again, normally we would lock the passports away as soon as we'd been across the border. We hadn't actually had to use our passports crossing the border that day, but we'd had them out ready just in case. And that's why they were in Angela's handbag. So although the people got away with our passports, Angela's driver's license, they probably got away with about $5 or $10 in cash.
Yeah.
But the cost to us with having to replace all these things and just the factor of having to go to the embassy to get emergency passports and everything else
And fly home to
and
Paris.
fly home to get the replacements was quite huge.
Yeah,
So
expensive.
we let our guard down, and we shouldn't have done, and we got caught for it, sadly. Hopefully it won't happen to anybody else. But if we'd looked on the government website, it actually had and stated on there that there was problems with people getting robbed on the toll road, and we hadn't done it for Spain. We'd done it for Estonia, we'd done it for Latvia, we'd done it for Poland, we'd done it for Turkey. But again, complacent, well, we're in Europe now, everything's okay, and that's where we got hit. So,
Any tips you have for safe money management?
Well, we don't really carry a lot of money. We carry obviously some dollars, but we don't carry it all in one place. We have it maybe in a few places, so that if we have to pay a bribe or whatever we have to do, we're not everybody would see. It would only be a little bit of money that we would take out of a certain part.
and also if something is stolen like we had, if the money's not all in one place, then we're okay. So
Yeah.
we keep it separate.
And we tend to
locked
go
up.
to the ATM in each country and not take out a lot of money, just take out what we would
Enough.
require. Yeah. So we'd never really had carried a lot of money with us,
No.
really.
I think probably the maximum we start off with in cash is probably about $1,000, and that's there for the countries where ATMs aren't available.
Or insurances sometimes.
Or insurances at borders. Most places will take dollars anyway. But we never kept it all together in one place. It was always spread out in different places, either on our person or in the Land Rover, so that we could manage it better if there were any issues.
Okay. And on navigation and communication, what do you guys use to make sure you know where you're at and you don't get lost?
We've got a few sat-navs, different ones. I have a TomTom. We have OpenStreetMaps on a Garmin, and we use Maps.me quite a lot because of the offline maps as far as that goes. Generally, what we'll do is Angela will also have the paper map open with her, so she can follow the route on there, and we can look at either making changes to the route that we're doing. And to be honest, the paper map gives you a much better understanding of where you are in a country geographically. If you just blindly follow a sat-nav, you haven't got a clue where you've been or where you're going. So we find the paper map gives us a much better understanding of where we are and what we're doing.
We marked it up every day we stopped. Yeah. We marked it up when we stopped.
Yeah, we also mark up the map so
smart.
we know where we've been and everything else.
Yeah.
So makes life much easier.
Yeah.
We also have a spot tracker, which we use for tracking our route through satellite, and that has the distress function on it if we need to. And for our family and friends, there's an OK function. So if we're wild camping, we send them a message and they get a text just to say this is where we are and we're okay. So we kind of have that other way. That's just another security feature so that if they don't hear us for a couple of days,
hopefully somebody will call.
Somebody will call and say, "Hang on, have you seen them?" or "What's happening?" and they've got an idea of where we were.
Yeah.
So
the tracking function on the spot, what do you have that set at? How often does it ping where you're located?
Every hour on my one.
Okay.
But that doesn't go to everybody. The tracking feature is for ourselves.
Uh-huh.
The OK feature just gives that position where we sent the OK. So if we're camped up somewhere, they'll just get one Latin long for where we are with a message saying everything's okay, we're fine.
Did you make a habit of doing that each night or once a week? Did you set a specific time period when people could expect that you would check in, basically?
Usually it was whenever we're wild camping.
Okay.
We'll have spoken to somebody and said we're going to be wild camping for a few days. And they'll get an OK signal. If we end up and it's in a city or in a hotel where we've sent the OK signal, until we tell them that we're leaving, then we don't send it every day when we're at the hotel.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, let's go through some onboard necessities real quick. How much fuel can you carry? How far does that take you? And how do you calculate your fuel needs?
I have an auxiliary fuel tank, so I can, instead of holding just 60 litres, we can hold 110. 110 litres will get us round about 500 miles, give or take. It depends on the terrain. It depends on what we're driving into. Land Rovers aren't particularly streamlined. So when I was driving back on my own from Kazakhstan, through the steppe, which is very flat, it was also very windy and very cold, which is, for a Land Rover, they don't like that. They don't like the cold and they don't like the wind, so my fuel economy dropped. Usually, once the main tank is empty, that's when we start looking for fuel. The only places we've had issues with that has been Uzbekistan, where many of the cars are all running on gas or propane, and you go to a petrol station, they just don't have diesel. So we tended to, in those places, we go a bit further and we try and plan ahead by speaking to other people who've been somewhere and actually seen that they had fuel. And a lot of the gas stations, although they didn't have fuel, somebody would make a phone call and a guy would turn up in his car with a couple of containers of diesel in the back, and you could get some sort of diesel from there. But you make sure you filter it before you put it in your tank.
And did you have some kind of a pre-filter that you would pour it through, or how did you do that?
Yes. Yeah, I have a strainer type filter that as you fill up the tank, you can strain it before it goes through, so it gets rid of a lot of the debris and everything else that's in there, and also a lot of the algae as well that grows in it if it's been left.
Interesting. Okay. And then how much water do you guys carry?
Our water tank is 50 litres. That is fed through a pump and through a Nature Pure filter, so we can use that for drinking as well. On top of that, we generally carry, we had about 10-15 litre container that we could carry just any water that we would use for the washing and everything else. We try not to use our filter water for washing unless we really have to, because obviously every litre you put through the filter is depreciates the lifetime of the filter, and they're not cheap to replace.
We buy bottled water.
And we do buy bottled water quite
countries.
often. In the hotter countries, we'll buy bottled water just to make life easier for us. But 50 litres of water, well, if I'm on my own, it lasts me forever, whereas if I'm with Angela, she's a bit more flippant with the amount of water we have, so I have to keep telling her, whoa, that's enough. So
she's keeping things clean.
She does. She's very good at it.
Great.
But then I have to find some more water.
It's all a balance.
You do have to try and keep your car and that clean, because obviously hygiene can obviously lead to different things. So to try and keep it a bit clean is good. I would definitely say that.
Yeah, you do.
I do, yeah, because I think more chance of you catching other things if you don't keep it reasonably clean. Yeah, that doesn't mean to say I'm out sort of mopping things, but I do sweep out most nights because the dust and sand and everything gets in everywhere, so I do tend to do things like that.
We probably tend to do a good clean out
once a week. I do a good clean usually.
Yeah, probably once a week.
If we get
Angela
to a good
does.
campsite with water and things, I'll give it.
Then we'll give it a good clean out.
Okay, very good. And then do you guys use solar or a generator at all?
We've got solar. We've got two 120-watt solar panels on the roof that are fed through a Victron MPPT controller, and that then feeds our auxiliary battery. The auxiliary battery is also fed from the alternator when the car is running. Our batteries are only 68 ampere-hour capacity batteries, though, so they don't last forever. We have to be careful. But because of the size of the batteries, I can fit them both underneath Angela's seat in the battery compartment. I can get two in side by side. Starting battery is no problems. I can link the two batteries if I need to for using the winch or anything else like that. And if we're in a campsite where we really are struggling, or if it's particularly dull and solar can't keep up, we can plug in the fridge through an external socket, so we can plug in into the power supply on the campsite as well.
Okay, and do you know what type of solar panels you're using?
Mine are SunPower ones. Monocrystal, rigid ones. We did last year, we had flexible ones because we had the trailer and we could take them out and put them out whenever we wanted. But what we didn't realise with the flexible ones, we thought they'd be better because they were being stowed away in the trailer every time we left. But the bouncing around in the trailer actually ended up destroying them. And they only lasted the trip, and that was it. So we went for rigid ones this time because they're a much more sturdier and better suited to this bouncing around kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, okay. Any specific recovery gear that you use or would recommend that other overlanders make sure that they've got with them?
We have Max Tracks, we have the winch, and we have just an assorted bunch of strops and towing bits and pieces, and we carry a shovel. We've never had to use any of them for ourselves. I've used the winch for other people. Max Tracks we've never had to use. We tend to be very careful when you're living when your vehicle is your home, which is it is for us on long journeys. We tend to try and use our heads first and not get ourselves into a position where we're going to get stuck. That's not always possible, but it is. We've never got ourselves to the point that we haven't been able to get out or we've needed assistance to get out. We've always managed to get out one way or another. We have compressor for the tyres, so we can lower the pressures and then pump them back up again as and when we need them.
Yeah, probably a pretty important part of your overall setup to make sure you don't get stuck.
Yes. again, it's your home. You're living in there. You're not going to do silly things with your own home, so why would you do it in your vehicle? There's lots of people. A lot of people seem to think that overlanding means 4x4 and rough routes and everything else. It doesn't have to mean that. There are some people who like to go and do the real gnarly crags and everything else in their vehicles. There's not many that will do it when it's their home. They're very thoughtful about where they're going to go and where they're going to put their vehicle. And you don't want to risk that. The last thing you need to be is be stuck or broken down or breaking something because you thought it would be a bit of fun to go and bounce over some big rocks.
True. Any philanthropy that you did, volunteering, inspiring others, or any opportunities that you've seen that other overlanders could take to spread some good in the world?
We haven't done anything specifically ourselves. We always try to pass on wherever we are. We always try to pass on a good impression of us to any of the countries that we go to. So people say, oh, I've met the Scottish or I've met the British or whatever, and they were really, really nice. One of the big things, I guess, why we do the overlanding as well is we find the media has a lot to answer for when they're talking about different countries. And we speak to friends who, when we went to Turkey last year, people said to us, why on earth are you going to Turkey? It's dangerous. What are you doing? And we found that we'd originally planned to be there for 4, maybe 5 weeks at the most. And we ended up there 9 weeks in the end. We absolutely loved it, and the people were brilliant. We had the same questions this time, going to Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Why are you going there? It's dangerous. What are you doing? We have the same with people people like that from Russia are like that. Absolutely not. What we found is people are really, really nice, really friendly. So if they have the same kind of media views about us, try and show that actually we're not like that. We're friendly. We like to chat. Everybody's just the same. We're all in different countries, but we all want to be happy and have a nice life.
Amazing hospitality they have.
Yeah, and the hospitality you receive when you're travelling is second to none.
No, and people sitting there, they come over with plates of barbecue food to you and invite you to come and join them, to come and live with them, stay in their houses. Amazing amount of welcoming we had. Yeah. There was never a negative time, was there? No. At all.
No. I would just like people to go out and see the countries for themselves and don't believe everything that you hear in the news. By all means, be aware and do your due diligence for a country that you're going to and understand, if you're in a Muslim country, you respect it's a Muslim country. Angela covers herself up. She doesn't go around with her hair showing or anything else like that. In the same way that if people come to our country, we expect them to respect our country as well. But that doesn't mean that you're completely different or that you can't get on or that there's something wrong with these people. They're actually all...
Nobody just wants to say that.
Yeah, everybody wants to be friendly. They're all interested and just... Yeah.
Driving about in Uzbekistan, people would drive in the car next to us and stop and go, where are you from? Welcome to our country. Really, it was very friendly.
A lot of people actually thanked us for going to their country.
Thank you for coming to our country, and please tell them it's not a bad place. And really nice. And obviously language is a problem. We can't speak their language. They can't speak much for us. We'd sit a whole evening with people that we couldn't understand, but we managed to have some sort of conversation with them. Yep, and sat the whole evening with them, chatting in some way or other, sign language or, smiling, laughing at each other, showing pictures. So,
What a great experience. So this has been a lot of fun, guys. Anything that we've missed?
I guess the overriding thing for us is for people to go out and travel.
Just be aware.
It's not as scary as what you may think. And even with our experiences that we had, specifically with Angela, that's probably one of the nightmare experiences that you have before you leave, something like that happening. But that's not going to stop us doing any more. You deal with it at the time. It's never as bad, you hope, as what you think it's going to be. I think before you leave, the worries before you leave are far worse than anything that you actually face when you're out there. But yes, don't sit back. Don't wait too long either. We waited. We should have done this a few years ago for sure. It's difficult if you have family and kids and things like that. you've got to get the finances in place, and you don't want to leave your children behind, if, even as they're getting a little bit older. But don't leave it too late. Go and enjoy the world. The world is a beautiful place to go out and visit.
Let's wrap it up with some fun facts about you. Any new hobbies you enjoy as an overland travel?
Yeah, I draw. So I sit and quite enjoy drawing when we get the time, and I quite enjoy doing that. So yeah. And I also took this time a shawl that I'm knitting. It's going to be for my children. They're all getting married just now. So once they start having babies, then I have the shawl, and it's been knitted all over the world. It's not finished yet, but when I get peace, I'll sit and do that, yeah. Or I like to sit and draw, yeah.
I think for me, it's probably photography.
Yeah, you
I enjoy taking the pictures. I wouldn't say they're great, and I have to take a lot to find a good one. And I think while we're home this time, while we wait for Angela to recover, I'm probably going to try and do some sort of photography course that will give me a little bit of progression. So when we go off the next time, our photography will be even better. Yeah, I hope.
So.
Yeah, well, some of the pictures we've seen are great, and I think it was on Instagram we saw some of the drawings that you do, Angela. You're an amazing artist.
Oh, I'm just learning, but I enjoy doing it, and that's basically what it's about. It's about
it shows.
Enjoy and relaxing. Yeah, so yeah, I do enjoy it.
Do you play any musical instruments on the road or around the campfire?
No. And I don't let Dave sing either.
No, I don't sing. You did get me a mouth organ, but I haven't got around to trying with that yet.
Goodness.
Years ago, I a mouth organ and a harmonica.
Oh, okay.
Many years ago, I used to be able to play Swing Low Sweet Chariot from the England rugby team, and probably I might be able to belt that out at best, but no, I haven't really practiced with it.
But then we'd probably fight, because I'm Scottish, he's English, so we'd probably end up fighting with that. Yeah.
What's your favorite drink in the morning to get you going?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah, coffee.
We have a morning routine where I get up, and I'm not really much of a morning person. So Angela will stay in bed, and I'll pass her coffee up into the tent so she can stay up there, because if Angela comes down, the minute her feet touch the ground, she's asking questions. And I get absolutely, drives me mad. I like to have a couple of coffees in me before I have to start answering questions about what we're going to be doing for the day. So usually I get up first, make the coffee. I'll sit there. I'll read the news if I've got any kind of internet access or something like that. I'll read the news on my phone. And Angela will stay up and doesn't get to ask me any questions. It's a win-win
situation.
Yes,
as far as I'm concerned.
I'm happy with the situation, and Angela is happy with coffee in bed. So
yes,
it works well.
I think we've learned something very important, Lisa, that we should duplicate what Dave and Angela did. I'll get up and get some coffee. You just stay quiet upstairs.
That really resonates.
It's great. Don't knock it. It's really good.
Smart.
That is one thing. When you're traveling together, you're 24/7. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy, but we've gotten pretty good.
Mostly.
We don't generally fight or anything, But the great thing about the Land Rover, it's so noisy.
Yeah.
You don't have to talk to each other.
You don't have to talk to each other. It's that noisy in a Land Rover anyway. Yeah. So even if you fall out, you can't continue to argue.
No. But, your podcasts are brilliant because, when we're traveling, we listen to our music, and you get fed up of the same sort of music. And we started looking at the podcasts, and we've been listening to podcasts as we're driving. So they are brilliant.
We found podcasts, and your music gets repetitive. So we've started looking at audiobooks as well. So if we're on a road where it doesn't really require much thought, we've picked a couple of audiobooks that we both want to listen to, and then we'll just put one of those on and read away.
Yep, very good. What's a favorite beverage at night to wind down after a long day on the road?
Oh, probably a nice glass of wine for me.
If it's a hot country, I'd say it's a cold beer.
Shandy or something, yeah.
No, cold beer for me, but you like shandy.
Yeah, shandy or a nice glass of wine, yeah.
Usually, if Angela's in the mood for a shandy, it means it's my beer that's got to supply the beer for the shandy. So, but we tend to have a vodka once in a while as well. If we're sitting around the fire of an evening, if it's a nice evening, we're quite happy with that.
It also depends. We have an expense, what we spend in a day, so we always have to watch that as well,
Yeah, we try to budget that we don't spend more than £50 a day. And so that comes into the whole equation.
So there's days when we don't have to drive, we found somewhere and we'll be sat there and enjoying where we are. So we're not paying for a diesel, so we can afford to enjoy more beers, which is quite nice sometimes.
Yes.
And also we meet other overlanders, so it's quite nice to enjoy some quiet time, and it's not often quiet, but just enjoy a few drinks with them and chat about where we've been and where they've been, and it's brilliant that way. We've met quite a few overlanders.
What is your best advice to aspiring overlanders like us?
Visit one of the Overland shows.
Speak to lots of people who have done it already. Find out you'll get lots of information from each person, and it all depends on, for you personally. You will adapt it to suit you. We've learned things from other people. They've learned things from us. So basically talk to a lot of people. Yeah. And go to the Overland shows. See how they've set up. Try it out. Don't just buy something. If you can sit in or lie in it, go and do it. Because we found our tent, the heights. It's okay for us.
Yeah.
But if you were taller than you, then that tent might be a bit of a problem because of the length.
Yes.
So you need to make sure that what you're buying for you is suitable.
Don't rush out and buy lots of new things. Use what you have. Go and visit the Overland shows, like we said. Have a look and see what other people are doing. We've got many friends that have got Land Rovers, the bigger long wheelbase ones. They've all stuck pop-top roofs on them rather than tents. But every one of them has done things slightly differently. And you'll find that what suits one person might not suit another one. So you have to find what suits you. And the best way to have a look at that is to go around some of the Overland shows, see what people have, see how they're doing things, and see what you want to do with your overlanding, where you want to go, what you want to achieve. If you're going to be going to places that are really cold, bad winters and things like that, maybe it's better that you get something that you can actually sit and live inside. If you're happy enough, you're going to warmer places, our system works fine. When it's cold, it's okay. If it's cold for a little while, we can go inside if we need to, and we have a diesel heater that runs inside when needed. But the tent is cold. So have a good sleeping bag and be aware of what type of overlanding you want to do. That's the first thing, I think.
Okay, great. So how can people learn more about you and what you're doing?
As you said, we have the Instagram, Polaris Overland. We have a Facebook page, which is Polaris Overland again. And then we have our website where we try to put up blogs on where we are. It's a bit behind just now because when you're traveling, you need decent Wi-Fi connection to be able to upload pictures and do everything that you want to do. On there as well, there will be a trip report for the Mongolia trip, the Mongolia Raid 2018 trip that we've just done, where we'll put down statistics, how much we've spent, what we've spent on fuel, things like that. So it gives an idea, because usually a lot of questions are revolving about finance when it comes to these longer trips. So it gives people an idea. We've just started to do, and I just put up the first one today, is equipment reviews. So the equipment that we're using, I give it a review. I've just done one for the tent that we've got, just so people can see and have an idea, and maybe help them with when they're deciding what equipment they want to buy and how much they want to spend and everything else like that. It's not cheap to buy this equipment, so the more information you have before you go down that route, the better. Within the website, there's a bio about Angela and myself and where we were before we started doing this. And there's just photos. We've filled up photo galleries for people who can have a look at some of the pictures from the countries that we've been to and actually see how beautiful the world is out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of great information in there. The photos are great, very well laid out in each trip that you do. And I'll look forward to seeing some of those equipment reviews as well. So Polaris Overland, and that's Polaris.
Yes. Yep. -overland.com.
So we'll have that in the show notes. Any more information you'd like to give or useful resources that our listeners should check out?
Like I say, Overlanding Association, have a look at their website. You'll get lots of information. It's free. You just log on and you can have a look. And they have basically it's like a world map, and you can select whatever category you want to have a look at, and it'll give you by country, and it will also give you updates. So if somebody's been there and found that something's changed, you can get that information. So that's great for planning things like insurance, whether you need a carnet de passage, temporary import rules, all that kind of thing. Yeah, for traveling in Asia, there's a great website called Caravanistan, and that'll give you information on border crossings, which ones are open to international travelers, which ones are open only as a dual nationality for the countries either side. It also gives you information on visas and things like that, and information on places to go and visit when you're there. But have a look. It's difficult. I mean, for us, we found a few overlanders that had been doing trips that I initially started following, and from them I learnt some more and got passed on to other people. But by all means, if anybody's got any questions and wants to drop us a mail on the website or on Facebook or whatever, we're happy to pass on any information we can or help out where we can. I mean, that's part of the reason that we're doing it all, is to help people and hopefully inspire some more people to go out and do overlanding.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. We are humbled that you've given us such an amazing look into your world, experiences, and knowledge. Safe travels and adventures to you, and we hope to catch up with you again in the future.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
To to use.
And thank you to everybody who's
Yes.
listened.
Have a great afternoon. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Saw her in the woods, yeah. Fire was cracking, she was covered in tats and saw me. Was only that
So if you can't cross the border together and your partner takes an additional 4 hours to get across the border, what are you doing for 4 hours, Lisa?
Crossword puzzles and my nails.
It's your nails. I totally thought you were going to say coffee.
Yes, I gotta stop and get my coffee.
Coffee or tequila?
It depends on where we're at.
And how cool to be overlanding in these countries, to have people stop and ask where you're from and welcome you to their country. I think that fascinates me every time that we hear it.
With open arms.
Yeah, and a lot of times, this is the second time specifically we've heard that the people want you to know that they as a people do not necessarily represent the political views of their country, and how welcome and opening they are to you being there. So that's just super cool. So, and even with the experience with Angela having surgery and everything else that they faced, their recommendation is to go travel and go overland and be smart and enjoy the world. And I just love their accents.
I can listen to them all day.
So Dave and Angela, thank you so much for your time in sharing your stories and experiences and really being just so open with what your experiences were for others to learn from, and awesome stories. You guys are a lot of fun to talk to. So again, thank you for taking the time. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. We really appreciate you, and all the nice comments and notes that we've gotten over the last couple weeks have been, quite frankly, pretty amazing. So thank you.
It's a good idea to visit the show notes page on our website at ghteoverland.com/podcast. Select the Polaris Overland episode. All the details and helpful links are already there for you.
That is correct. And send your questions, suggestions, and feedback to ghteoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. If you have an Amazon Echo, remember to tell Alexa, play the GHT Overland podcast. We'd love it if you'd connect with us on social media at GHT Overland. Be sure to share the episode with your friends who enjoy travel off the beaten path. Overland travel is all about meeting new friends, seeing the most amazing places on earth, and of course, new food and new drinks.
Speaking of tequila, Do you have a favorite drink or a food recipe for overlanding? We'd love to feature it and you. Send them to ghteoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. Before you race off, it would mean the world to us if you'd rate and review the podcast, give GHT Overland a little iTunes love so we could reach as many overlanders as possible. Thank you, and we will see you next Thursday for a brand new episode of the GHT Overland podcast. Bye!